right, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday and welcome to Villanova University and the Villanova School of Business. We're really delighted that you could all be here with us today, especially given the nor'easter, though it is better than last year's weather when we had snow. So for next year's event, who knows what Mother Nature will bring, hail, some other catastrophic weather, but we're here and we're very excited about the discussion that we're about to listen to. I'd like to introduce several people. I am Tim Hoffman. I'm the Associate Director of the Daniel Dalella Center for Real Estate here at the Villanova School of Business, which is a 2-year-old program that really focuses on providing opportunities for our students in the commercial real estate field. We have a minor for our undergraduates. We have new courses that are being rolled out into our MBA program, and really put on a dynamic set of programs that bring together the real estate community and industry together with our students. I'd like to introduce Sean Houghton, who is the director of our center seated here, Jim Veazey, who is one of our center fellows, Charlie Davidson is right in front of me, is another one of our center fellows at the MBA level, and then Burke Ward is over here. Burke teaches our real estate law course, so I'm really excited that our team could be with us today. To start off with a few thank yous, this has been a big effort to organize today's panel, and I'd really like to thank Kelly Mecca and Jessica Taylor, as well as the entire ULI Young Leaders Group for their assistance and leadership in putting together this program. The Urban Land Institute is a delight to work with, and they've really got a great team. I'd like to thank Jerry Lipp and her team for really taking care of all the logistics for today, the reminders, and making today happen, as well as our panelists for their time and insights. And then I'd also like to thank TD Bank and Commonwealth Players Title for their sponsorship of the Young Leaders Group in this event. The Dalella Center is very proud to be a member of the Urban Land Institute, and I think that's because there's a great fit between our educational objectives and the mission of the ULI. We focus on developing ethical and creative problem solvers, and the ULI's focus is on responsible leadership in the use of land. And as our students are in our investments course, looking at different property types and what types of uses could go there, and our developments course and our law course, really assessing what's the best use of this land. Those types of discussions are exactly what the ULI is focusing on. My one small commercial that I'd like to give is, after this event, our students are always looking for internship or full-time positions. I know that it's a very challenging market right now, but ultimately we can only do so much in our classrooms, and we need to find them opportunities in the real estate business. So if you think that your organization might have an internship or full-time position available, we would love to hear from you, and please feel free to contact me after the event. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our esteemed moderator, Dr. David Hartzell, who is the Stephen D. Bell and Leonard W. Wood Distinguished Professor in Real Estate and Director of the UNC Keenan Flagler Center for Real Estate Development. Dave is a great friend of our program. He was with us in residence for the last month or so, working with our students on developing cases and helping Sean and I on really some program strategy. And we're so fortunate to have such a good friend and champion of our program down in UNC. So at this point, I'd like to bring up Dave to introduce our topic here.
Great, Tim. Actually, can everybody hear me? I think I'll just sit here if that's all right, and just introduce the topic. We're a little bit late, running a little bit late, so I'll be brief because I know you probably didn't come here to see me, but rather to listen to these three guys about their programs. First, Tim and Sean and Jim and Charlie, it's great to be back in my hometown, as it turns out, back in Villanova. As Tim said, I was here for about a month, a little more than a month, working on some cases and things like that, and I got the chance to meet with the great students that are in the room here. And whenever I do this back home, I did this about a month and a half ago at a panel, I always ask the students to stand up. Would you do that, please? I know there's probably 10 or 12 of us here. Go ahead, stand up. Come on, there you go. Not only, obviously, these are mostly upperclassmen here who are true believers in real estate. You can sit down now. But they're also in search of mentors. So if you saw them stand up there, please seek them out after the conference, because I know everybody that's starting out in business can use some insights and gain from your experiences that have been in the business for a long time. And I'd also like to thank the ULI. Here's a plug to the students. If you're not a member of ULI, you should be. It's a great organization with great events like this and other events throughout the country. and it is also a great learning and networking experience. Today's panel is on transit-oriented development, which means a lot of things to different people, I think. You read about transit-adjacent development, transit-joint development, transit-oriented development, and I think what happens is that you kind of get lost sometimes in really thinking about what it is. There are often sort of great notions of what a transit-oriented development should be and what it should provide to a community or to a local economy. But if you go and visit a bunch of them, it's not always obvious that it actually delivers what maybe was promised or what was expected when it was planned. And if you stop and think about what a great transit-oriented development looks like, right? What does it include? How does it all come together with synergistic land uses? You hear about walkable communities, higher density, synergistic mixed uses, livability, some parking but not too much, combination of internodal transit forms of transportation. And it's really a tall order that transit-oriented development is asked to deliver. And like I said, then you try to think about sort of the ones that you know that are really working well and some of them don't, and you wonder, I always wonder, how did they get from the idea when you first decide, well, I'm going to respond to an RFP, right? And I'm going to put all this stuff in there until they sell their first unit and earn their first check or earn their first rent check. And what's in between is ridiculously complex and takes a lot of organizational skills, and there aren't a whole lot of developers out there who can, I think, pull it all off. I teach a development class at the University of North Carolina, and we'll do cases on maybe small aspects of TOD, but the whole projects are very complex, obviously. And we talk about development as being sort of a puzzle where you're putting all the pieces together, and the pieces are always moving around, so you're trying to grab them. But with TOD, I'd say the number of pieces and the volatility of the movement is way higher than just your standard development. And in my mind, it revolves around two or three key issues that sort of increase this uncertainty, increase the complexity, obviously increase the time frame given all the people and institutions that you're dealing with, and also increases the cost relative to traditional sort of development, greenfield type developments that we might think about. Most of these are dense mixed-use projects that require expertise in different land uses and development sectors, which increases the cost. You're usually dealing with fragmented regulatory, economic, and political and policy environments where you have local and regional planning departments, transit agencies, public interest groups, neighborhood groups, public and private debt and equity capital providers, all working with the developer in public-private partnerships. And just, again, the magnitude of the complexity just expands, and to make it work for the developer, you're usually asking for some kind of public investment as well, either through filling the equity gap with tax credits, financing with tax increment financing, and a host of other things that increase the complexity and, at least in my opinion, limits or reduces the number of developers who can actually pull it off. And in today's environment, you're also obviously subject to the vagaries of what's going on in the overall economy and in the local real estate market within which you're actually bringing this space to the market. And if any of you were in San Francisco last week, or have read the Emerging Trends in Real Estate report that was just put out by the ULI, you'll know that this is not a great time to be doing development of any kind, and when you're dealing with a long-term, highly complex, mixed-use project that maybe is even worse. And this is a good spot to plug next Wednesday's ULI Emerging Trends conference in Philadelphia. Is it? We had ours in Raleigh. Is right now, actually. It's going on right now. But you'll hear Steve Blank and a local panel talk about what's going on in the local market. I would highly recommend that you do that. All these issues create sort of a crazy quilt of rules, incentives, participants, motivations, perspectives, goals, objectives that make it very difficult to navigate. But fortunately, we've got three people who are going to help us do just that this morning and give us a better feel for pulling all of this together and tell us about some specific projects they've been involved with and some of the hurdles that they've had to jump across all the dimensions about which I just spoke. First, we'll hear from Tim Henkel, who's directly to my left, who had the shortest commute today. He lives in Rosemont, and he's Senior Vice President of Penrose Properties. He's going to talk about about a project in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and other things he's working on. Then we'll hear from David Liebor, who's in the middle here, to Tim's left, who probably had the best excuse for not being here today, but came anyway. His daughter had a baby at 2 o'clock, but 7 hours ago. I think that deserves a round of applause. David is Chief Counsel and Chief Administrative Officer at Drainoff Properties. He's going to talk about the Ardmore transit redevelopment just down the street here. And finally, we'll hear from Tony Marchetta, who's Vice President of Elcor, who's been involved with transit-oriented developments probably before they were called transit-oriented developments. And he'll give us some background on TODs, as well as talk about an incredibly complex and interesting project he's been working on in Hoboken, New Jersey. So, Tim, why don't you start us off?
Always good when the technology works. I'm not sure if that was supposed to be like a pump-up speech or
Laying it out. Yeah.
just laying out that complexity. Suddenly find myself a little petrified by our own project here. I'm going to discuss the Gateway Transit Village development in New Brunswick. It's a project that is what I call a transit village with a history. It's wound its way through a lot of regulatory environments. It's wound its way through a lot of economic ups and downs. I'm going to talk about how that happened. And even more importantly, it's wound its way through a number of developers. We are the most recent player as it relates to the development of this property. And our participation relates probably more to our experience in New Brunswick than our experience with large-scale mixed-use transit village developments. This project was always going to be a large-scale mixed-use transit village. We happen to be kind of the final piece in the puzzle as we try and put together a project that succeeds. In our world, success is completion.
Lisa.
Good point. I don't think I haven't just look forward into my future. So it has a history of bouncing off some of the obstacles that David has just talked about. I think one of the most impactful moving pieces that we deal with, and what we'll talk about here, is the calendar. The calendar just keeps marching on, and the things that you're designing your development around physically, the things you're designing your financing around, are going to change at a moment's notice. And so you're always kind of waiting to position your development. And I say we, we're talking about the city, its development corporations, its local representatives looking to dive through that window when the window opens that little bit of a crack. So I kind of describe how that crack opened. But before I do that, much faster on my computer at home. A little bit about New Brunswick. New Brunswick has a history of urban investment, or part of that history, or only a part of that history. But what you see here are some of the really important things that have happened in the past. Are really the big R's are of the most importance. Rutgers essentially downtown is anchored by two campuses: the College Avenue campus and the Cook campus, which allows George Street, which is the spine running up and down, kind of the center of the red dots, allows George Street to be a true downtown transit-oriented corridor. In addition to the train station that's there, shown here the words Transit Village in the blue train station logo, is the Rutgers University bus system. It's the largest university-run bus system in the country, above USC's. So you have all the bones of true transit-oriented development. Now comes the opportunity to do a transit village. Some of the notables on this list of investment are the Helget Plaza, recently done. We have some images here. Skyline Tower, which is an 80/20 development that we own and operate. The county courthouse, which was redeveloped with Keating. I saw some Keating people here earlier today. Rockoff Hall, student housing development. That's actually the image of Rockoff Hall, which is Rutgers' first off-campus development, and really anchors George Street. Has put a huge student presence on the George Street corridor. There was a day in New Brunswick when you would never see a young woman or a group of young people jogging down George Street in New Brunswick near the dusk and dawn today. Now it's commonplace, which has changed the entire landscape of of the smaller scale retail corridor. It's some real vibrancy that's going on. On the periphery here are shown Livingston Manor, Providence Square, not necessarily notable buildings to some, but we own them. And so we put them on the map. The importance there, though, is to identify, how a company like Penrose gets involved. We're a mixed-use, mixed-income developer. When we throw the mixed-income term in there, it means we have affordable units in many or most of our developments. So the Skyline Tower building, which is left lower corner, is an 80-20 development. 20% of the building is affordable, done with tax-exempt bond financing, sold tax credits. We leased the lower 3 floors back to the county courthouse system. And I should mention that is a rehab. That was the old county administration building, which was a much uglier building. It was a presentation unto itself. It was completed 5 years ago. As a result, we kind of have what is the downtown New Brunswick market rate landscape like. There are other market rate developments in New Brunswick, none of which are so closely located to the downtown activities, some of which are downhill. The Riverwatch project, which is larger scale, 400 units, approximate to Route 18, but doesn't have the same real walkable to the train station sort of benefit. The Rockwell Hall building I talked about, Providence Square, Livingston Manor, these are senior housing developments that we did starting in 1994. So our history in New Brunswick is one of, we can deliver it. I think that whenever you get kind of going into this sort of larger scale mixed-use redevelopment, one of the factors that you want to put in your, do I have this in the toolbox, is a level of trust among the municipal, the public-private part of the partnership. So, we have a lot to lose by saying, hey, yeah, we can do that and not doing it. So that's, I think, one of the things that we want to always recognize is important. So here's the history. Where is the transit village? Where does this transit village come from? In 2006, New Brunswick became designated as a transit village, and that was an opportunity for New Brunswick to secure a venue towards additional financing, additional funds, and additional permitting processes, and these sort of light speed sort of notions that if you designate it as a transit village, you can go more quickly through the PAID, you'll go more quickly through some of the other state level endorsements. I've never heard that that's proven true. The designation of the transit village, I think, has a nice public policy ring to it. The actual value to the transit village and some of the actual, what it takes to do a development, not nearly as tangible. This project, though, did leverage its transit village designated into DOT funds. So there's a large-scale element of DOT funds contributed to the property. The DOT funds are running to the parking authority, which is a significant player. But here, just to orient us, the orange or kind of trapezoid under the word walkway and above the word Eastern Avenue is the transit village site. College Avenue is the main spine of the campus, College Avenue campus here. And if you were to go above the big building above College Avenue, that's where the main square, that's where all the Rutgers University students graduate on the big perfect lawn because they have great weather every time they graduate. And that's where everybody goes. And to the right is, of course, the train station located along the rail lines. This is an Amtrak rail line. This is a stop on the Northeast Corridor. It's not as regular a stop as we'd like it to be. Someday, hopefully, it will be. But that is the transit node that makes this a transit village. So the criteria for the design of this actual transit village was, to create a parking resource for this train station. There exists a parking deck across the street on the train station side called the Farron Deck. It's old. It's considered to be a good redevelopment site. It's sort of under capacity in that it's only 3 or 4 levels. It's been built on. It's been added to. It's clumsy. It's kind of beyond its useful life as a parking deck. Many cities that would survive for a long time. New Brunswick is a very forward-looking city, and they're looking at the Farron Deck as not necessarily a permanent part of its future. So there's an opportunity here to do even more proximate transit-oriented parking. So the idea was to use that as a criteria.
Can you guys hear back there? Everybody all right in terms of great? Excellent. Sorry.
And I'll try to speak up. The other idea was to get a branded university bookstore. The small university bookstore at exactly the site of this development. A local retailer who was associated with one of our panelists who had been serving that campus for a long time. but the university and the town looking to get that sort of larger scale. Rutgers University is huge. Get that larger scale, you can buy your books and you can buy your red hat with a big R on it in the same place with some real volume. So that was one of the criteria. Also, Rutgers University looking to house some retail space, put some destination retail and Rutgers complementary retail at that university location. So there's a place for people to roll out of the train station, a place for people to go to New Brunswick to get to. And that manifested itself in some of the selection of the retail space as a concept, and now we're designing for some retail and getting that going. There on the bottom, if everybody can't see past Tony's head, was the critical factor, which was the, this is a for sale workforce housing. So it had a residential tower, residential component added to it, which would have for sale workforce housing. Of a lot of importance to the Transit Village designation. The workforce term, a little bit vague, not quite defined. At the onset of this concept, it was for sale condominiums, but with some provisions for people to be sold at levels that were considered to be workforce affordable. Obviously, definitions like that need to be flushed out. These are the components that then made up that thing. And this is still in the early days of this, of conceiving of this transit village. So, not a lot changed now. You can sort of see that there was a lot of commitment to the residential component, not a real understanding that that residential component could happen. From the 2006 transit village, we all went downhill first in the condo market, then the residential market altogether. Then you end up with renderings that don't have the top of the building because nobody's really sure how tall this thing could be. The one thing I like to point out in this rendering, which I think is wonderful as it relates to the actual transit-oriented development, I like to show a New Jersey Transit train instead of an Amtrak train, but it's the walkway. If you look at the lowermost crosswalk, that is a walkway, yep, thank you, that takes us at grade from Somerset Street right to the train platform. And I've heard a number of stories of how that was kind of initiated, and I think I'm going to give credit probably where anybody who actually had the idea first would give credit now. The mayor, walking out there one day, said, wow, if I could just walk from here to there, I wouldn't even have to go uphill or downhill. So everybody had to go down Easton Avenue under the train track, up the steps to get to the train platform, creating a much more readily accessible route in all senses. Was something that became really sort of a motivation behind how this thing kind of got legs, literally. There it is. Scaled up, you can see the entry to the Rutgers quad sort of on the bottom. So the Rutgers University buildings there, obviously proximity to the church. That's one of your land uses that doesn't ever move. I'm just sitting here. Me too. It's called calling our experts. Yeah?
I don't know what happened there.
So actually, if you guys can have that image in your mind, you got this, this podium, right? And we began to speak as this thing sort of evolved about the podium of parking, office, retail, and what ended up to be a comedy club for the Rutgers University students. This podium of parking was the bottom of this mixed-use building. The podium is financed through the Marshall Parking Authority, so they're a participant in the project with their own brand of financing. So there will be a public parking deck within this podium. Rutgers University is contributing money. They will own the space that houses the bookstore. They will own the space that houses some of the retailers, and they will own the space that houses the office uses themselves. Their offices will be used for academic uses. So they are financing one. They are financing a piece of this building. So what you have there is an actually completed, financed podium. But that podium without the residential tower is not really anything to be terribly proud of. It certainly isn't the contribution to the downtown and the redevelopment. And we don't quite get the full mix of mixed uses required to call it a transit village. So that's where things turned a little difficult in, I think, the life of the project. We're then about 2007. And about that time, well, we're going way back to the beginning here. In 2007, the Urban Transit Hub tax credit, I purposely had a slide that would have me not screwing this up. The UTHTC, the Urban Transit Hub Tax Credit Act, was passed in 2007 and was a vehicle. We're talking up here about why that was done. So there are the pure of why it was done. It was a vehicle to attract corporate users to downtown locations, take advantage of a corporate tax credit, which was valued at 100% of your corporate investment. So any business making a corporate investment of $100 million, $75 million or more, could take 100% of that and directly offset it, portions of it, the rules are obviously more specific, and take a tax credit and benefit, obviously, from basically getting their money back. The problem was in 2007, there weren't nearly as many state corporate tax companies which had that tax liability, who were also going to invest. So at this point, the credit is tracking the user, the credit is tracking the investor. So you needed to be a company making a $75 million investment in a community where you were going to use the facility. And you had to have that corporate tax liability that you can offset in order to get the value of it. Obviously, you could take 60, 70% of the corporate tax liability. So there was some wiggle room there, and if you could fill your gap and make your return on that investment, there was some opportunities for it to work, but it wasn't working very well. It didn't have a huge uptake. I think when the program was announced, Verizon announced that they were doing something in Newark. Nowhere else, to my knowledge, did the corporate version of the UTHTC really get going. So the problem really was that the businesses had to run with the investment. The businesses had to run with the credit. After 2007, unfortunately, came 2008, which got even worse. But the powers that be, and the Stimulus Act of 2009, otherwise known as A 4048, had us investing, had the state morphing that tax credit program, so changing the UTHTC program to have a residential component, which was obviously a very forward-thinking thing. And many of the people here, we talk about who were the forward thinkers. Always you have policymakers and legislators who are legislating into the future to meet some of the needs. Always there are projects who have the needs before the legislation is done. So a lot of projects that would benefit from the modification of the UTHTC to have a residential component. So that modification was made. The minimum investment was taken from $75 million to $50 million. The tax credit was taken from 100% of your capital investment to 20% of your capital investment. The criteria was that you had to have be a predominantly residential development, and then beyond that, going to flip forward. And then beyond that, you're there. So this became then the vehicle to look for how could this project that's sort of been shelved, but moving forward very dramatically to do the podium pieces, the parking and the office. How could that project take advantage of the residential piece and try and finally get to the point where we weren't building a podium for a tower that would be built by a crane later, which I consider to be very, 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 very unlikely or very, 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 very far into our future, and make a good use of the site and actually accomplish the transitability component. So in came the UTHTC. I have a slide here that will calculate the benefit using these projects, sort of round numbers of investment. There it is. So round numbers say it's $135 million total development cost. The capital investment portion, which has been described to me, and I'm not the expert, though I don't think there are any experts in this yet, as the investment in the building. If you take the building, turn it upside down, shake everything out of it, so those are all those depreciable pieces that aren't really part of the building, then add back your design costs and don't include your financing costs, you get what is essentially the capital investment. So for the purposes of my calculation here, I'm calling that $100 million. $20 million is the value of the actual calculation of tax credit. You might notice that's 20%. And then you need to then further devalue the tax credit because it's offset over a period of time. It's a 10-year tax credit. So that somehow the legislation has determined that there's a minimum of how much you can offset the credit doing a time value of money calculation on it at 75%. So 75% of that $20 million investment is $15 million worth of equity that we can presume can be dumped into the project. So the question is, where does the $50 million go? And obviously, it's the residential component that needs it. One of the beauties of this thing is that you use the entire compass of capital investment to calculate the urban transit tax credit amount and the equity investment. You can put that equity wherever you want to, so there are no restrictions on it. The other change, when we went from the corporate tax credit to the residential tax credit, is that it became portable, it became saleable, it became transferable. So now the earner of the capital investment needs to be a single entity, which has some sort of structuring details that need to be paid very close attention to. But the earner of that credit can sell it into the marketplace. So all of a sudden, the sphere of people or companies taking advantage of that credit is grown, and includes those that wouldn't necessarily have to be an occupant of the building, wouldn't have to take advantage of it. Then typically you're talking about large-scale utilities, insurance companies, and big corporate investors. Interestingly enough, New Brunswick has big corporate investors. So there's the potential that Johnson & Johnson could actually take advantage of this credit and be another, continue to be a good citizen in the city. So it's yep. So anyway, all I have left, fortunately, as I'm being whispered to wrap up, are images of kind of why this thing has some real good future. This is this is what you show Rutgers when you want them to really bite. Here's the big clock that faces your university, and here's what everybody gets to see when they walk by the bookstore on the way to the train station. The clock is looking for corporate sponsors as well, so I'm not sure what will be bigger, the clock. And then just some of the elevations was giving us an idea of the scale of the building. Right now, configured at 20 stories total, 14 of them residential. We have componented the building into two residential pieces. We will maintain 3 stories of workforce housing, and then we'll have a residential rental component underneath, with the rental market being a little more, very little more stable than the condo market right now. It's yet to be seen whether or not the urban transit tax credit says, and it doesn't say, it's between its legislation and its regulations, whether or not there needs to be an affordable housing component within the residential rental component. That's something that I think many of us are kind of meeting with the NJEDA administrators of the program about. There you have it.
That's great. Thanks, Tim. Can you just tell us when you started the project until when it's actually going to be completed? What's the time horizon?
We'll build it out in a 20-month time frame from now. We're actually breaking ground. So one of the real trepidations is I hear you caution us about the complexity of these times and of these projects. We can always handle the complexity of the project. The complexity of times is something that we can't necessarily presume. So fast and furious is good. The site has been cleared. The site work is underway. So the podium is going to start. And then what our job is to chase the closing effort with our residential financing. So that's where we are in our lives right now. That's why I talk so fast. That's our very real challenge as we move ahead.
Good stuff, Tim. Thanks. Next is David Lieber, who's going to talk about the Ardmore project.
I talk fast because I don't want people to really hear what I'm saying. Let me just take off actually on one thing that Tim just mentioned. We actually have a project that we're developing in Newark, and we're obviously very interested in the tax credits also. And one of the things that General Properties is known for is having done throughout the country rehabs of many, many buildings and getting historic tax credits. One of the issues, especially since everybody is economically challenged in terms of getting loans these days, is how do you get people to put money up front? Both the historic tax credits and certainly in the urban tax credit, you don't start getting the benefit of it if you're a purchaser of the credit till the time you get a CO. One of the things that you really want to do is to be able to use that money up front. So one of the things one wants to try and do in terms of development and putting the package together is to go to the various institutions that might be purchasers of the credit. You give them, on a more of a discounted basis, obviously, the benefits of the credit. They won't actually get it until there's a CO. That's why there's going to be a discount. And then hopefully they'll give you some funds up front. Now, obviously, if they do that, there are all manner of guarantees which they're going to insist on with respect to the use of the credit. But I raise that not only because Tim mentioned the issue, but whether you're talking about, and many of you have a lot of sophistication in terms of development and financing, especially in this day and age, when financing and monies are very difficult to squeeze out of the lemon, if you will. Being able to do things like that from the public subsidy money helps you in terms of going to banks and other lenders who are all running around saying, we're lending, we're lending, we're lending, we're lending. Sure, you're lending, but at 50% loans of value. And so, therefore, there's a much bigger chunk which you have to try and cover through other pieces. Before I tell the Ardmore story, which you could all, I don't have any boards or any other accoutrements, if you will, to show you, but you can go see this live on your way back to work if you're going that way, and it's just 5 minutes up the way. One other issue I just wanted to mention about TODs, and that is this. The general experience that most what I'll call efficient developers have in developing property is after you go through the various zoning aspects of it and the entitlements that you need to get to develop, and you actually go develop the project. Most people will tell you, and certainly as John R. Properties doing the Symphony House and now on 77 South Broad Street, it takes about 2.5 to 3 years. The common wisdom when you're doing a TOD is if you're lucky and things, God is speed with you, you're talking about 6 to 7 years. And that is very important, not only in terms of being able to stay the course and being able to do the development that you might want to do, but you have to realize that, or try to understand that what your projection might be in terms of the dollars of the TOD could be well different over a period of time, all other things being equal, where you don't have that problem as much when you're doing regular private development. It takes longer to do, your prices are going to spiral. Funnily enough, because today construction costs, most people would say to you, are actually going down rather than up. There is a little bit of a benefit to be had. It's a little bit, but it does in fact go both ways, and usually it's on the upscale rather than on the downscale. So that's another issue. Before I actually start telling the story, and I haven't started to tell it, I just want to mention there are two people here who have actually been very involved in the Ardmore project. One is Mr. Lloyd from Amtrak, who's the head of Amtrak Real Estate, with whom we've negotiated, and he's been helpful to us, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. And the other is Jim Sherman, sitting in the back there, who has been incredibly involved in this project and has done a lot of really good work in helping in terms of the engineering and various other aspects of the project. Most developers will tell you that the way they like to do it is to get everything through the township or the city or whatever it may be, and then be on their own. That's a different kind of an animal from a public-private partnership. Because public-private partnerships, and please forgive me, depending on which side you are, whether you're public or private, work like this. The public side of the partnership needs a developer who can do the work that they want the developer to do. Because if they could do it themselves, they would. Certainly if it was efficient for them to do it themselves, and that's a perfectly understandable aspect of public-private partnership. But they think because they're public, and because they give their time to projects, and because certainly their personnel are severely underpaid, they think that the developer should do it for, if not free, at least almost free. And developers, I'm sorry to have to say that I'll admit this, developers are in the deals to make some money. And that may mean that their money is a ways off. And that doesn't mean to say that they're not interested in helping out the township and making good names for themselves. But the reality is, a developer is in business to make money. Now, in our particular case, even though I'm not going to discuss this in detail, there are 3 or 4 aspects of our transaction with Ardmore, where once this part gets developed, there are other development sites. The amount of money that Dranoff is going to make on this is minute, if it's any, where their vigorous shares, if you will, is going to be on the next project, which they will get if this project works. So why are we in Ardmore, and how did that project really get started? Quite a while ago, the township realized, for a whole bunch of reasons, that the Ardmore corridor, by which I mean along Lancaster Avenue, from an economic point of view, wasn't doing that well. And certainly, if you contrast it to over the tracks to the suburban square, thank you, more, and you walk up and down those streets, even in this economy, you will find that that's a very vibrant area. The township was able to secure a federal transit grant. And one of the issues that you want to understand when you work with the township is, who are the players? How are the politics? There are, as there is in any governmental institution, there are some people who are in favor of development. There are those who are less favorable, and there are those who say let each business person stand up for themselves. If they continue in business, fine, and if they don't, that's also okay. The more long-term vision is there was a realization by the township that the other side of the tracks, in other words, the other side of the tracks from Suburban Square, needed to have economic stimulus. That's a small s. Economic stimulus with respect to its development. And I think that they understood that the way to do that was to create a vibrant area behind, if you will, where the stores are on Lancaster Avenue. They put out an RFP, and that RFP was responded to by Jana Properties and 2 or 3 other developers. And in the first round, Jana Properties was not selected. And I think this is, if you will, the first key to transit-oriented development. The reason why, or one of the main reasons, but maybe not the only one, well, the reason why Jana Properties was not selected was because the first developer who was selected had a very ambitious project, which, if that ambitious project had worked, would have been wonderful. But you have to be able, as in anything, whether it's building, whether it's any other kind of business, to know how to size your project. And after a short period of time, it became clear that that developer wasn't going to work, and then the township turned back and selected Jana Properties to be its developer. This is a particularly complex development. The parties who come to the table are the township, Amtrak, SEPTA, and also in a tangential way, but not completely tangential, are all the business people along the corridor who need to support, or who we need, if you will, to support the project. Let me explain, if I might, how the project works physically. If you go to the township, and pardon me using this, if you go to the township, there is a township building right over here. Right next to the township building is a police station, which is part of the township, and in front of that is a parking area. Then right over here, there is another parking area, which belongs to the township. And then all the way over here is another parking area. Anybody who goes from Ardmore into Center City, or the other way, but usually into Center City, often uses that parking lot. And most people think that that parking lot is SEPTA's parking lot. Indeed, it's not SEPTA's parking lot. It's SEPTA's. It is the lot which SEPTA has leased from Amtrak. It's Amtrak's parking lot, and SEPTA leases it from them on a long-term basis, and that's where the parking is. And then, of course, here, if you go down a little bit further, is the train station. One of the things that Amtrak and various other train companies, if you will, are interested in doing is to make sure that people there's greater ridership with respect to the use of the trains. That's certainly something that the President Obama has pushed over a period of time, and the concept of ridership and people commuting into work rather than the problems that we have with automobiles these days is something which has been focused on. In order to increase ridership, one of the things you have to do is to make the train stations more attractive, or should I say, more user-friendly. Most of you, and I'll certainly speak for myself, I live in Marion, and although now I drive to work, the reality is every time SEPTA's train comes by and I have to climb those 4 steps, I feel like I don't have to exercise that day anymore, okay, because it's a challenge. So one of the things that needs to happen is the platforms need to be brought closer to, or brought up to, being on par with walking onto a train. So one of the things that the federal grant is for is to make the platform higher, to make the platform longer, and also to make the station building more attractive. And the plan is, for now, that train building will become a 3-story train building. The first story will be an attractive ticket office with some kind of a coffee shop. The next floor and a half, if you will be for office use. Well, that's all well and dandy because we now plan to put the residential building, which is a 7-story building, maybe 7 1/4, but certainly basically a 7-story building right next door for approximately 120 units. What's the benefit of that? The benefit of those 120 units is those people are going to be likely to use the train to go into town, and we're going to create this, if you will, transit-oriented development such that it will also make that entire area, including the corridor of Lancaster Avenue, a more attractive and a more vibrant economic area. Well, so far that sounds nice, right? But how do you get there? If so far SEPTA's parking, least though it be, takes place on that area that we're going to put the residential building on, and which we want to create, if you will, a town village in, what are you going to do with that parking? So the township has its own challenges in terms of parking. There is hardly a meeting of the township which deals with issues in the area where they don't talk about the problems that they have with parking. Where are they going to put the parking there? In fact, the biggest problems that we had, or discussions that we had at the township, when I'm talking about the public hearing, was people were coming out of the woodwork about the problems that there are in the township of parking. So what is going to be created is there's going to be a parking garage. And that parking garage is going to have to absorb all of the parking which SEPTA has. It also needs to give Amtrak a sizable amount of parking, because their hope, of course, is, just like SEPTA's is that ridership will increase on a significant basis. They are going to improve their tracks, and the corridor which goes from Center City, actually from New York, through Center City to Harrisburg, and then hopefully, and then to Pittsburgh, that whole line will increase and make that line a more attractive and a vibrant line. In order for that to happen, Amtrak needs parking also. So clearly, this whole project needs to be done on a staged basis. First, the garage pretty much would go up, and we would have to make sure that SEPTA's parking is taken care of during construction. Then the residential piece, or maybe contemporaneously with that, the Amtrak station. Where do we get the money for all this? As we said at the beginning of this discussion, it doesn't grow on trees. As I mentioned, there is currently a federal grant which is being used in terms of the development process. SEPTA is putting forward significant monies because they know that the garage is going to be built in large part for their purposes. There's going to be an underground garage which also goes underneath the residential portion of the building, of the development, which will be for the residential tenants. So they're putting a sizable amount. We have put in for money from the stimulus from the government, and it's our hope that come December, January, we'll hear that they are going to, that they also are going to contribute a significant amount of monies to the what we call the public side of this. And if we get those monies, that means the public side of this will go fairly easily. We believe that when we go to the two sources that we need to go to, which are, number one, investors, equity investors, and banks, that probably is not going to take place till late 2010. We believe and hope, obviously, that money is going to soften up. But because TOTS have become something which everybody has started to become interested in, and that there's a recognition by investors that these are good projects, and they see that there is a major contribution being done on the public side, we believe that we will be able to see some softening on the private side and get that investment too. Because the quid pro quo to people who invest with that is that they will get a return and that they will be recognized as investors for other projects. Speaking about talking too much, I think my time is probably about up. And I think I'll leave it at that for now.
That's great. Our last speaker today is Tony, and Tony's going to talk about the entitlement process and some of the vagaries of that. Thank you.
I think I am going to stand. That's going to exercise. As Tim sets us up technically. I'd like to also mention that a lot of what was said by Dan dealt with Rutgers. Yes. We beat University of South Florida last night. Stomped them, 31-0. So I don't have to talk about the Yankees and the Phillies then. So, all right. Well, welcome. You've heard a lot of very interesting tales. We have a small club of developers that are masochistic, that pursue these types of projects. And in fact, I believe the three of us are all on the short list for the Collingswood project. Are you still in it? No. Okay. You both.
We're mildly.
Okay. Well, we're all not sure that we could do it, but we at least put our names in on it. Transit-oriented development. I'm a planner by training. I graduated from Rutgers in the planning program. And, you know, transit-oriented development is the current term of art. But over the years, we've all heard neo-traditional development. We've heard smart growth. We've heard new urbanism. I never really liked that one. And all this translates to its density. We as a society have, you know, moved from cities to suburbia, and the planners and the environmentalists, especially today, are trying to move us back into the cities. And these programs, be it transit-oriented development or new urbanism, are essentially trying to get people back into the cities. And to make it work, you need more density. So that's basically the thrust of what this is all about. How do I move this? Right? Oh, there you go. But first, a brief commercial about Elcor. We're creating better places to live, learn, work, travel, play, etc. And we want to make money. We are a national development company, and we do specialize in large, complicated projects. Public-private is one of our areas of expertise. Our very first was in New Brunswick, directly across the street from where this project is. It was a combination of Rutgers, New Brunswick, Parking Authority, similar cast of characters. We've developed 20,000, it's more than that now, in both residential units and commercial and retail space. Total project values exceed $8 billion. And we've undertaken transit-oriented development in New York, New Jersey, and the Washington markets. Well, what is it? Okay, I try to put this down because I've presented this to different groups, including students at youth colleges, and try to put it in some kind of descriptive detail. And it describes development of commercial and residential elements with easy access to public transit and train, bus, subway, student buses at Rutgers, ferries, airports. They all contribute to some degree or lesser degree. Transit plays a significant role, and it will be an increasingly significant role in all development decisions, I think, in the future. Smart growth advocates are promoting it because, as I said, get the people back into the cities because nobody wants to develop the greenland anymore. And mixed use allows the creation of a variety of vibrant types of developments. Single-use developments are just not in vogue these days. Public transit is most often in urban areas. So if you're going to do transit development, good chance you're going to be in a more urban environment. And as ULI has just said in its 2050 book, the future is urban. So, and the U.S. population is becoming more urban as time goes on. Why do developers do it? Money, as we've heard. You expect higher sales prices and rents because you've got a great location. You've got you have public transit near you. Commuting becomes an attribute to the site. Mixed-use development allows you to penetrate multiple markets at the same time. If you've got a rental project, a for-sale project, retail project, commercial project, you can have multiple markets addressed at the same time. And when one's doing better than the other, you're still in business. Promotes higher densities. Developers always want more. And those densities are best suited near transit locations. And because it's a public-private venture, generally, the public agencies can come to your aid in acquisition and financing of different things. Lastly, the market is growing in transit communities, so that's where the developers will go. What are the benefits to the host communities? Well, this is always a hard sell in some communities, but it generates fewer traffic trips, fewer cars, fewer congestion. The densities translated into higher profit. If you're building a building that's got 200 units as opposed to one that's got 40 units in it, the value of that asset will be that much higher, hence the taxes will be higher to the community. There's a potential for pilot payments. And, you know, I'm speaking about New Jersey right now, but in New Jersey, a pilot payment in lieu of taxes, will allow a community to change the name of a tax, property tax, to pilot payment, and instead of divvying up the tax, the 100% of the tax between the schools, the county, and the municipality, if it's a pilot payment, 95% of the dollars go directly to the town. The schools get aced out, and the county gets 5%. So those communities that are under financial stress, and they all are, all 566 in New Jersey, see a pilot payment as a potential to get more money from a development project. I personally think these downtown projects, and as Tim mentioned earlier, enlivens the community. I went to Rutgers when you didn't want to walk down George Street back in the late 60s and early 70s. Today it is a very vibrant area. There are restaurants, theater, students now. Generates fewer school-aged children. Well, whenever you put more people together, your typical market is going to be those that don't have kids, historically. Empty nesters, and also young couples that are just getting started. Typically, when they start to have families, they try to find a little house with a picket fence around it as they raise their families. What are some of the downsides to transit development? Well, transit stations and locations are usually in those older communities that have tight infrastructure, old infrastructure, tight roadways, and other difficulties. The project in Hoboken that I will describe to you in a few minutes, our main sewer line that exists today is wood. So that gives you an indication of older infrastructure. Available parcels of land are hard to come by because they're small. And if you want to develop a fairly significant project, you have to amass more property. So you have small, and they're frequently affected by environmental constraints. It's an old gas station site, or it's an old factory site. Fragmentation and relocations make the assembly of these sites difficult. As I said, if you want to amass property, and by the way, the Gateway project required that they assemble a site that had different property owners, and ultimately were forced to sell to the city to develop the project. But it worked out well for all parties. Right, Mike? Yes, okay. Zoning and design standards. When I was doing development initially in the mid-'80s, and I went to a suburban community and suggested that we would do an 8-unit per acre townhouse project, there were people standing up in the audience screaming it was much too dense. I joined Elcor in 2000. My office was in Jersey City, and the zoning permitted 200 units per acre. So there's a great deal of disparity between what people think as higher density. And you'll learn it if you go to any public approval process, entitlement process. So you have design standards that are issues, insufficient density to support the cost. The costs in urban environments are typically a lot more, value of the land, infrastructure improvements, what have you. So you need more density to be able to undermine or underwrite the cost of the development. Parking requirements. You know, there's not a good one-size-fit-all plan for parking. New Jersey has the residential design standards, which in a project I'll show you in a few minutes, stipulated that for this 200-unit apartment complex, I needed to have 1.9 parking places per unit. Our property line was adjacent to the train station. We argued that, you know, a lot of our people are going to use mass transit to go to work. It's a half hour from New York. They granted us a waiver. So from 1.9 space per unit, we went down to 1.7. Okay, 0.2 of a space times 200, that's 40 spaces or something to that effect. It was a benefit. In reality, 60% of our residents there use mass transit. We had less than 1.3 spaces per unit, and we have easily 40 or 50 extra spaces at that job. Okay, so financing is difficult not only in urban areas, but right now everywhere, and 50% is not bad. Our first project after the market caved, we were offered financing, but it was 65-35, and we had to put 65 equity in. We did not do that job. Ultimately, we did do it, but we had to put 45% equity in. Okay, I've got a couple of examples of things that we've done. Transit-oriented development comes in all shapes and sizes, depending on where you're doing. A 7-story building in Ardmore is a small project, but not in Ardmore. In Jersey City would be considered a very small project. But here's a project we did in White Plains, New York, Bank Street Commons, old redevelopment site, 20 years ago. Metro North tore down the station, built a brand new train station in White Plains, and gave the site to a developer to redevelop. Well, the economy crashed then. The hole that existed was chain link fenced, and it sat there for 15 years. Elcor went in, made a pitch to the officials in White Plains, and were able to be designated the redeveloper of that site. And we built 500 residential units there. There is an approval for a hotel, although we haven't got one built yet. And we've had some retail there as well. But it really enlivened the downtown, and the community has really taken off to the extent that Donald Trump is building there as well. This is one that we've gotten approved. We are the developer with WMATA, which is the Washington Area Mass Transit Authority. A former driving range, about 45 acres, I think it is. And we did the planning, got the approvals. Took us a long time. As indicated, lead times on these projects are astronomical. The bigger, the more complicated, the longer it is. But we've gotten the approval, and we've actually broken ground in 2005 on the first phase. We built large grocery store, residential units, and we've started an office building. Not the best market to be trying to lease an office building, even in the Washington market, which has been very good for us. This is the scale of this, in my mind, the smallest scale of transit-oriented development. My first project with Elcor in 2000, we actually were selected to get New Jersey Future's first Smart Growth Award on this project. This photograph was taken from the railroad tracks, right adjacent to the railroad tracks, and is a 200-unit high-end apartment complex on 4.8 acres of land. So it's a density of just over 42 units per acre. And I had some apprehension about it. Planner, this is the right thing to do, but the parking issue was the thing I mentioned about earlier. But also, we had limited access to this site. It was an old car dealership, Bruner Cadillac. And again, as I said, it was adjacent to the railroad tracks, a half a block from the station itself, underneath the trestle. And we had this little two-lane road as our primary access for 200 units. And my concern was morning and evening rush hour, primarily morning rush hour, cars trying to get out, old residential traffic network. I was actually trying to get the town to allow me to use an emergency road as another primary access to the site. They rejected it and said, we'll see how it turns out in the future. And in reality, it never was a problem because so many of the people ended up being mass transit users. There was never a problem with access in and out of the site. And here's the project that I'm working on today. I personally think that it is going to be, when done, the most significant transit-oriented development in New Jersey, the Northeast, and perhaps the country. And why? Hoboken Terminal is a rail yard, as you can see here, that, yeah, there it is. That is the site of 5 modes of mass transportation. And it's right across the river from the largest economic engine in the Northeast, at least, which is the city of New York. This terminal operated until mid-60s when ferry service stopped on the Hudson, and then was later reactivated. That's a ferry right there, back in the late 80s, early 90s, I'm not sure exactly when. But this building was never reactivated because the terminal was designed for double-decker ferries. This is not the type of ferries they use today. Needed a tremendous amount of restoration. Built in 1907, it's copper-clad. Historic renovation costs are astronomical. They just did a temporary dock there, and that's where the ferries to New York go from. We have train service from all north of northern New Jersey into Hoboken Terminal. We have a light rail service that runs along here. We have bus service. This is the bus station over here. And the most significant is we have subway or PATH service directly into lower and midtown Manhattan. So it has always been a location where transportation was king. Who remembers On the Waterfront, Marlon Brando? It was done right over here, but it was once a huge, huge dock area where ships came in and unloaded. That's all gone, and they've built a beautiful roadway. But this is the ferry. This is the ferry terminal. We're looking south, and this is Jersey City. When I joined Elcor, my office was in this building, and that building was the tallest building in the state of New Jersey. That was in 2000. Look what's happened. This building is Goldman Sachs. It's almost 400 feet taller than our building. So it's really taken off. Jersey City's really become, and Hudson County has become like the 6th borough of the city of Manhattan. When we built this building in the late 90s, half of the building was leased to Merrill Lynch, the other half to Lehman Brothers. So Wall Street was moving into Jersey City for back office space especially. This is the site. What's not shown on this graphic anyway is that the site is bisected between Hoboken and Jersey City. Most of my comments will deal with the Hoboken side right now. That's what we're working on. And again, this is an indication of different modes of transportation. We have taxi cars, PATH, commuter rail, light rail, ferry, buses. And the current mayor, the new mayor, recently elected mayor, is a big proponent of bicycles. So whatever plan we come up with, we'll deal with that in a serious way. So there's the boundary line. That's the breakout of the acreage. About 20, 25 acres of that, total of 80 or so, is water, so we're not really going to develop that, we don't think. The general zoning that we're looking to achieve there is to keep the transit-oriented functions where they are, and the most appropriate use, we believe, adjacent to transit, will be the commercial and mixed-use retail. Retail will be everywhere, by the way. And then we expect to be able to build a residential transition zone as you move a little further out. The distance between here, which is the heart of the train, to there is about 2,000 linear feet, so it's not that far to begin with. On the Hoboken side, this is all speculation because we have no entitlements to this day. There are on the adjacent road a few parcels over here that were zoned an FAR of 6. Everybody understand FAR? I'm not sure all the students may know FAR 6, but it's 43,560, which is square footage in an acre times whatever 6. That's 250,000, give or take, square feet per acre. So they have approved the project directly across the street with an FAR 6. So using an FAR of 6, and in this site particular, because it's a public site owned by the state of New Jersey, we are required by law to produce 20% of whatever residential we do as affordable. So on this Hoboken portion of the site, we expect to have 4 million square feet of residential, 500,000 square feet of retail, entertainment, some office, 2 million square feet of office, hotel, that could go up or down from that. Ultimately, almost 7 million square feet of development in that portion of the site. And you'll see the dwelling units will be about 3,200, market 25, and affordable about 640. And nearly 7 million square feet, 2,500 parking spaces. We're using roughly half a space per unit, or 1,000 square feet is roughly it. And we're employing every technique known to man as far as shared parking, shared car service, so that we can keep the parking down, because parking is basically a loser. It becomes a drain on your development project. Because the railroad will remain active, we can't develop on the railroad track itself. So we're restricted to the perimeter of the site, where, because the number of trains coming into Hoboken has diminished, and the storage, which has been done here, they would literally store trains overnight on this site. It just doesn't make sense. Hoboken is a very active real estate market. The value of the real estate is very high. New Jersey Transit could use the funding because subsidies from the state are diminishing. They are going to allow us to develop on the perimeter of the site and try to generate as much as we can. They're going to relocate their trains to other less valuable locations, storage trains to less valuable locations, and we are working with New Jersey Transit. The concept is not unlike David's concept and also Tim's concept, where you build a podium. And we've broken down the sites so that we can have phasing. And a project of this scale, you have to have phasing. The upfront capital costs are outrageous. Making carrying those costs is what kills a lot of projects. So we have approximately 7 or 8 development sites here, starting from this one, which is adjacent to the newly redesigned bus terminal. Give you an indication how bad the bus terminal is in Hoboken. A bus has to make a K-turn when it goes in there. Buses are not really designed to make K-turns, and that's what they have to do to operate. No, my light's gone. Oh, no, here it is. Right there. Okay. The red indicates retail. The gold represents that structure. We're wrapping the parking facility with workforce housing and other types of affordable housing. We're dealing with some traffic issues, but since we're running out of time, I won't go into it. But because it's an older area, we're dealing with a lot of congested traffic issues, and traffic will be a major issue of concern. I'll just go through that. We think it'll be a great project because it will have all this multimodal activity there, and we will redesign the roadway to allow for a median. Right now it's a highway. That's it. That's what it looks like right now. You see some 12 and 16-story buildings on the left. This is the railroad track on the right. It's not well designed. Nobody understands the traffic patterns and how it came about the way it did. But we're hoping ultimately to come up with a much more pedestrian-friendly, user-friendly, residential kind of neighborhood that will screen the industrial railroad track which is behind it. Okay. And that's my presentation. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Tony. I went through that train station every day for 2.5 years on the way from New Jersey to New York, and it needs a lot of attention. Let's give our presenters a round of applause. We have a few minutes for questions. This was a very broad sort of topic area with some focus on some of the details. Does anybody have any questions for our panelists? Broad, general, specific? Yes, sir.
One question. David, you said that you're going to the Parliament for stimulus. What government?
The ones in D.C. We've been working through Pennsylvania's Department of Transportation, and they have forwarded a request for stimulus funds. And of course, we're not the only project up with those kinds of requests. There are lots of people at the table asking for bottles of porridge, and we'll see what happens. We hope to know by the end of December.
Other questions, yes, sir?
Yes.
You talk about transit-oriented developments, and a lot of times when you talk about what makes them transit-oriented is because they're near transit.
Precisely.
So other than the obvious of density, as a planner, what would you say are the 2 or 3 or 4 main things that you would look at that would be different in the development because it's near transit?
Well, we've all indicated how complex development is in general. And I don't care where you're developing, but once you get into public-private, the entitlement process becomes much more complicated, and even more complicated when you get into these very large transit centers. For example, I didn't show you where the path to runs underneath the site. We need to deal with the Port Authority and post 9/11, trying to get them to give us a detailed location as to where that subway actually goes underneath the site is very difficult because of security concerns. Dealing with these different modes of transportation, they've all got to be addressed. And it becomes a much more complicated site. I've been working on Hoboken since I joined Elmore in 2000. It's gone through 3 iterations. As indicated, you know, you bid one time, you get it. Next time you don't. The third time was a charm in this particular case. We were selected the third time, had them sign a long-term 15-year contract. We will not see dime one. I'm hoping we see dime one in 2014. And we had a real strong investment house behind us when we started the project, Lehman Brothers. And as a result, we've had some dicey moments there because this kind of capital investment by equity investment buy a financial house, they're going to want to see a return. I mean, developers want money. They want tons of money. So it's a very difficult financial structure, and that's probably, it's not really planning concern, but it's really probably the most significant one.
It's hard to make the time value of money work when
Yes.
you start 2000 and you don't deliver till 2015. Yes, sir.
Suggestion having put on both sides of your oriented development, including where next time you do this, have a public person talk about the unity through public. Forget the names.
No, it's true.
I agree with that.
Absolutely true.
The concept of what is.
All three of us presented, I think not one of us didn't talk about parking. So I think, the answer to all the questions, parking, everybody talks about parking. And, one of the lines I love to hear is the old, if you build a project for cars, you'll get cars.
Right.
But, if you're building a parking destination for Amtrak that needs that resource so it can be a park and ride, so it can increase ridership or have at least a future that includes ridership, you need to build for those cars. If you're doing a transit-oriented development, like certainly the Gateway Transit Village project is not a park and ride by any stretch of the imagination. Nobody's going to necessarily want to drive necessarily to New Brunswick to park that close to the train station to get. There are other train stations to drive to. But I think that we have to recognize that the parking issue is kind of the big driver. And this might be the only room I can say this in. We all stand in front of planning commissions and claim that we're not going to have much parking. I hate parking. I just hate it. You almost envision a future where developers are allowed to take a risk in an urban setting and say, I'm not going to have any parking. And the people who are occupying my property know they're not going to have any parking, and that's it. We're done. When they spill over into the neighboring streets, tow them, enforce them, ticket the heck out of them, and let's get out of here. But I think there's a lot of room on the land use side, on the public side, to start to be a little bit more realistic or forward thinking about how we deal with parking.
To add to that comment, Elport just completed in the last 3 or 4 years 200 luxury condominiums in Manhattan. How many parking spaces did we build? 0.
In our
Zero.
Skyline Tower
Not
building,
one.
which is in New Brunswick, 70 units, it has the benefit of the fair parking back across the street. We're polling it to figure out how many parking spaces are actually consumed. Those 70 units take 20 spaces.
Your point's well taken, and it's broader than that, exactly. The complexity and the risk.
Yes.
Oh, man.
That's right. That's right. And the complexity and the risk is
Do you have to bring that up?
It's true.
Harsh.
I just want to follow up on one thing. And when you're negotiating parking, in our case with Amtrak and with SEPTA, and with the needs of the township, and with the needs of the residential group that's going to be there, and with the needs of, in Ardmore's case, the Ardmore corridor of people where the retailers believe, and correctly so, that they're going to need some parking for people who are going to go to them. You have to, and you can't have the total number of parking spaces. You really have to get innovative. And something you just said about looking at what usage is, one of the things that we've looked at is people come to SEPTA. What time are they using the parking? In the evening, those spaces free up, by way of example, for people to go out to the restaurant. So you've got to look at a lot of different things. It's not one size fits all. It's got to be, you've got to look at a lot of different sizes to make it work.
You're right. You're right on the front line of that, because the second the notion of shared parking and taking that analysis becomes very subjective. The second that is introduced in the public session, it's like, these guys are snowing us. There's no way that they're being truthful, and they're just trying to get the parking count down. But shared parking is I think plays a very important role.
Well, everybody that has a driver's license is a traffic engineer when you go to public meetings.
I have time for one more. Yes, sir.
Just to sort of follow on to that, why is it so difficult to get the public entities to step up and actually promote this? Because it seems to be left to developers to be the lead individuals out there, and they're hanging everything on the line, and the community always looks at the developer with some suspicion. They're always thinking,
Here's our chance to have our public
Nobody votes as to whether
They
they
have
have a
to,
job.
and I have yet to meet any politician who doesn't want to get in the next time.
Does anybody know about Hudson County politics?
Anybody put the paper?
We had a meeting with the new incoming mayor that got elected and inaugurated on July 1st of this year for Wednesday. The Thursday before, he was doing a perk walk, had been indicted. So, welcome to my world.
Sir, maybe a comment from you about that question. Could you identify yourself? Sorry.
Joe Mango, I was on the Board of Commissioners of Watermark in 2017. I was president during that time, and got the 6 Congress of Gerlach. There are those politicians who don't like this, and they're there to follow. There are those who are elected because they believe they're elected to lead.
Right.
And the magic is to be able to lead people without losing the following. It's a part-time job. You almost make nothing for doing it. People have, by and large, become much less respectful of public officials.
Here, here.
And it is something that David could tell you if he was looking off the record, that you now have a different body there than you did before.
Right.
Part of those things. Who needs it? You spend all your daytime working and you go at night to be abused. So that, we're taking a lot of flack for the developer. Lots of times the developer has the job of making money. The public official has the job of leading people into the next generation. And the thing that many people, and I'm just talking about where I live, don't like is change of any kind.
You're right.
That is absolutely true. Thanks, Joe. We're going to turn it over to these guys, but let's thank our panel and thank you for your time.
Well, again, on behalf of ULI and Tim and Sean and Villanova Business School, we want to thank Dave and Tim and David and Tony for coming out today. And we have a couple giveaways.
Developing your own transit.
Yeah.
Sean Torpe, Jonathan Weiss, and Jerry O'Neill.
And we just want to remind everybody on your handout, we have some upcoming events. As David mentioned, we have our Emerging Trends next week. And for anybody who might be in the Lehigh Valley, they have a couple events coming up at East Stroudsburg. And they're doing a happy hour at the new Sands Casino. And we have our holiday party at the new Kimpton Hotel on December 8th. So we hope to see everybody out there.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.